Sorry. I was like, okay, do I say Social Cafe Interactive, Social Cafe Interactive Live? And then I'm like it's going to be Social Cafe Interactive Dead. I mean, I'm sorry. Okay. I think the weirdest thing sometimes. But anyway, so this is Social Cafe Interactive Live. And today we are talking about podcasting and live streaming, which is what we're doing right now is live streaming as marketing tools, marketing strategies. So it's a little bit of a twist on the normal topic of talking about podcasting or live streaming. And we've started out by talking about it a little bit on Twitter, tweets and posts. So, Martin, do you want to start us out and comment as far as the strategy of it all and using that to kind of get our digital marketing moving forward? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. It's one way of doing it, and I would say that mainly it's audio. So then you could get your message across by audio,
Hmm.
and then you could integrate it that the podcast on your own website, for example, on your own hub. You could get material for text, blog posts, transcripts, and you could have your own radio station. So you could invite guests, experts in the field, and you could have conversations. So I think it's a good way of marketing, creating content, and also something that could attract potential buyers, listeners, colleagues, partners, whatnot. Because as one that I look up to, a philosopher, he said that radio is the thinking man's medium. To and podcasting, I really think it's that. It could be entertainment, it could be education, it could be all fun, but it's concentrating on the spoken word,
Hmm. Do
and
you
in
think
a way, so I like it, and you could use it for different things.
are we too, I know, Martin, we've talked about how podcasting, as far as the Apple definition, do you think,
Yes.
are we too strict or not strict enough on it? Like, for example, um, before I worked with Anne as far as podcasting and her own podcast and the whole thing, she'd mentioned, hey, I have a podcast. And it was basically a recording of Anne talking, which was great. It was, she shared wonderful stuff. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
this isn't a podcast, it's an audio recording. But on
But
the other hand, does it really matter? I mean, does it matter
yeah.
if it's an official podcast or just a recording? Does anyone really
I mean,
care if
does
it's,
yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
oh,
does
that's it.
definition matters? Does concept matters? Does words have any meaning at all? Uh, you could joke. I'm a bit strict in a way, but on the other hand, I see how it will be both blurring and hybrids and fusions, and the listeners doesn't really care. I'm joking. It could be two dudes with microphones talking about something, but you can't so-called subscribe to it or follow it or getting notification thanks to something called really simple syndication, the RSS feed. So if it's like you said the beginning there, if it's a sound file that somebody have put on your website, it's an recording, audio recording, but you can't subscribe to it, you can't follow it, you can't get notification, and that's what's mainly on like things like on video, for example, on YouTube. I know that you could subscribe to it somehow, you could follow it. It is a RSS feed. Even Twitter or X had an
Hmm.
RSS feed back in the day, I think. But that's the whole core, the RSS. But it's technical. Listeners don't really care, but I care because that's the both the brain and the heart and the whole structure of podcasting. But
Right.
the
Right.
good thing is that we could enhance it and develop it. So what we are doing now, live streaming, that you so nice are doing and lots of work editing and put it together, that could turn into podcast.
Hmm.
But with a new podcast app application, a modern, when you are going live, Gail was asking that what is a live item tag, and I'm not a technical person. I don't really. For me, it's gibberish. It's HTML, and yeah, I know Deb, you know this kind of thing, but I don't really care in a way. But I protect it with
Right.
these new features. you could do lots of cool stuff, but it will take time. To see it in a perspective, these added features, like this value tag, for example, that you could send donations, in total, it's like 20,000 podcasts out there that are available with this, adding this new podcast features of
Mm-hmm.
4 million podcasts out there. Maybe 500,000 are active, but you see the potential.
Right.
So now
Right.
it's
Wow.
20,000 in a year. Maybe it's, I don't know, I can't guess. But when it's tipping point, then the so-called mainstream media see, wow, this is news, something is happening, because this technology you could apply on music. You are a musician. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you know, how do you get money for before you bought a vinyl, you know, and now you could stream as much music as you want for a certain amount.
Right. Right.
But only the big artists are getting anything for it. But with this new technology, you could do it by streaming satoshis, by sending boostergrams like donations and all kind
Mm-hmm.
of cool stuff. And everyone in the chain of production, like the jingle maker, the podcast artwork, could get a piece of a pie
Right. Right.
with
There's
this
an opportunity
technology.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Gail,
yeah,
you said, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off,
no,
Martin.
Well,
no, that's
Sorry.
it.
no, I was going to say, to me, though, it's a podcast if it has a regular time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people subscribe to it. It's if you don't have that, then it's not really a podcast. It could be audio or video or embedded somewhere. But to me, the podcast part is that it occurs at a given time and people can subscribe and you can get regular listeners who want to show up at that appointed time. That's the distinction I see. Now, where it gets confusing to me is that podcasts aren't just audio anymore. A lot of people call it a podcast, but they do video.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
That's thanks to
then
YouTube,
it's
though, because YouTube
something
started saying,
else.
"Hey, this is a podcast, but it's really a video
Yeah,
through
and
YouTube."
I don't want to, how to say, be controversial, but in a way it maybe it's good to be. Google recently, for some reason, stopped their own podcast player,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's calling Google Podcast slash Music go to YouTube
Yep.
for some reason, and you could guess why. They
And
want you to go to YouTube and be there and see advertising and other things like that. That's how it works.
and yep.
So good luck with that. So, but with Gail, and I could say that it's not in a defensive way, but I know how to struggle by myself to create a podcast on a regular basis. But the main advantage with the podcast is that you could listen whenever you want, not as a radio program that you have to dial in and at a certain time. That's the good thing with podcast. You could listen whenever you want, even if you are recording it at a certain time or air it or publish it. You could listen whenever you want. But of
Right, but
course, to
people
get
know
yeah,
it's gonna be
yeah, I
there,
know,
though, is
yeah,
what I
and
meant. They don't
that's
have to be there at that time, but they know that at that time a
yeah,
new one is gonna drop, and then
yeah.
they know that they can go and listen.
And thanks, Gail, for giving that argument about how to protect, defend, and also enhance RSS, because that's the beauty and that's the whole thing with RSS. You get the notification when a new episode is dropping if the RSS is working. If it's not working, you will not get that signal. But certain players, without naming any name, but I could say it's a big music player coming from my corner of the world, they want to get rid of RSS for some reason. And that you could guess also why they want to do that, because then
Yeah,
you
maybe
will
because they
use
don't
their
want
application.
independents to have an
Yeah,
audience.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I don't know if you guys remember this. A very long time ago, Google said they were getting rid of RSS,
yeah.
right? And that's
And
when a lot of us switched to FeedBlitz
yeah,
because feed, what was it? Feed
Feed
reader?
burner.
Feed burner?
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Google announced they were getting rid of feed burner and everybody and their brother was using it.
Mm,
And we thought, what the heck is going on with this?
mm.
Right? Did it ever really go away? Did it go away or is it still around?
It's not developing, but it's not going away. But yeah, because they don't. Yeah, we have to ask them why they are doing that. But I have my guess. But still, you need it in some way. And as a blogger, we know about that. As if you are like a journalist and a digital newspaper, you're using RSS because that's the whole core. Then of course the readers doesn't really care. They want to have they get the news in a timely daily matter or whatever. But the technology has to be there in one way or another. But again, the cool stuff is now coming, the new features that you could use. And that's why it's now starting to blur or hybrid or very interesting. Like with this live item tag, you could do what we are doing right now and use the new podcast app and then listen to this conversation and then send in and chime into the conversation, said, Martin, you are talking bollocks. Now I want to send a donation here. I agree with Gail and Deb and send a small donation, and then you will read that if you want during air, and that will be in the live sections. Then if you decide that that will be in the so-called edited, finished, published episode, that's another thing. But during live, you could be almost a co-creator as a listener,
Mhm.
and that's really interesting.
That
I
is
think.
really
Yeah.
that's gonna be that's like entering into the world of Jetsons as far as like, hey, this is I mean not Jetsons, but I mean as far as this whole new generation of opportunities.
But has it taken off any of it yet?
No, of course it's the geeky, nerdy types that are into it. But when you apply it to music,
Mhm.
this podcast application could be applied to music, and then musicians will see that they get direct response from their listeners, from their fans, followers, fellow musicians. They could see in real time that they get donation support instead of waiting, from this that is also coming from my part of the world, this organization collecting money from different, radio stations, concerts, whatnot, and say, here, Deborah, we have played this song 2 times, 3 times, 100 times, whatever, on the radio, on the concert, on whatever, and here's your check. Like half a year later, I don't know. I can't. I
Mhm.
don't know the details. But you don't have that connection. Now you could in the future be standing at a concert using an app and then sending a donation directly to the artist on stage, saying,
Wow.
"Wow, what a great song," or whatever. I
And
mean,
really feel like you're part of it.
yeah,
Yeah. Wow. So now is that like I realize that's not podcast that's part of the the artist experience, but is that like podcasting 3.0 when you talk about the podcasting aspect?
yeah, you could say that. I mean, whatever you want. I mean, Dave Jones and Adam Curry said that podcasting 2.0, it's not so it's hard to get that search engine optimized or so on, but now it have stuck. I mean, podcasting, whatever you want to call it, it's the development of it or the new phase or whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
but it's built on the old stuff that have been worked for a long time.
Mhm.
And
That's that XML stuff is already that's
yeah.
been around for a long time.
Yeah, and that was,
Right. Right.
a guy called Dave Weiner. He did that for
Mhm.
blogging, and
Right.
Adam
Right.
Curry did that
Right.
for podcasting, and he handed
Yep.
it over to Apple or iTunes, and they have been
Mhm.
stewards for that for a long time. But when things happened with deplatforming, freedom
Mhm.
of speech, um, and all kind of things, and then they
Yep.
said, "Okay, we have to do something about this."
Yep.
So that's kind of like that YouTube live comment thing where people send money and their comment gets highlighted and the
Yeah, it's like
person on the
super chats and
video
so on.
talks to them.
And that's good, but if you have on YouTube, you have to have how many hours or how many followers, and how in order
Yeah,
to
I
get
don't know.
it,
But
it's
but I'm
a
saying
huge
it's
amount.
similar to that though.
It is. So that's why, I mean, in order to sell it or talk about it, you could give that. It's similar to YouTube super chats or stars or whatever you call it, but it's for everyone. It's not only for big names or players or influencers or whatnot, and
I
it's
forgot
freedom
about
of expression.
stars.
Nobody could be stopped.
Are stars on Facebook? I
Yeah,
think I saw stars
yes,
on
they
Facebook,
have that
but
also. Yeah,
I haven't seen that in a long time. Is it still there?
yeah. I don't. I think so, but.
Hmm.
But there you see what they are doing now. Deborah, you probably know about that. And also Eileen, if you're now using it, is it like a third party and trying to stream on Facebook? Isn't that an issue now? I think.
The
Yeah, like you're using like I don't know, a third party live streaming
you're
application,
talking
but
about like the eCam, like what
yeah,
Miss
yeah,
Eileen.
and you want to do it on
Mm-hmm.
Facebook
Mm-hmm.
when something is happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I know. I know she's really into the eCam live and stuff like that. But
What's an
I mean,
eCam?
eCam's a software that
Yeah,
Miss
for
Eileen
Mac.
uses. Yeah.
Oh,
But
like SoundCloud, or what's that one
Um,
that everybody uses to stream
yeah,
to
it's like a
multiple
the
live
platforms?
streaming
StreamYard,
application for
StreamYard.
yeah,
StreamYard,
Yeah.
that's the one.
Yeah. It's sort of like that, but it's a separate software that only works on Mac.
yeah.
I used
Oh,
to use them for Skype because it was really cool. You could, whenever you use Skype, it would just hook up and record your calls and things. So I used that for all of my interviews. When I would call people, it would just automatically record it. It was really cool. But that was made by eCam. But I haven't used the software
But and
that
that's the
Miss Eileen uses.
challenge because with these social networks, they have their API and they have a walled gardens, and they could whenever they want they could change the rules.
Mm-hmm.
But with
Mm-hmm.
new podcast apps, then it's the challenge to say instead of these big legacy podcast applications, to dare to test a new one and support an app developer, because with these new podcast apps, the app developer could say, if you use my app, I suggest that you like 3 4 5% when you send a donation with this micro donation payment called satoshis, a part of a bitcoin, very small part of bitcoin. Then they could say, I would take 3 4 5% when you use this app, instead of selling it for per month or one time fee. So then
Mm-hmm.
it will help and support app developers, because they have a hard time to come up with applications. So
right. But
this will be really interesting. But nowadays it's the big applications have a main part of the market. But if we start educating listeners and fellow podcasters and others, more and more will find their new favorite applications.
But that makes
well,
sense. Like for instance, Blab went away because it's like it didn't have enough support, enough money, whatever. I don't know what's going on. I wasn't on the inside of Blab, so I don't want to, put out information that's
Yeah,
misinformation.
they have
But
like
now they
investor
have,
money and they burn them and
yeah. But now there's
yeah,
options here. Maybe there's a new way to fund things that we like, so that hey, let's donate money to apps that we like.
yeah.
but this is the problem, right? Even though many people are really annoyed at Facebook, right? No other alternative ever takes off,
It
right?
will,
So the
but I can't
the
say
the
anything yet.
podcasters will go to an alternative, but the problem is you can't get the audience to move consistently. It's
Yeah,
like MeWe. MeWe is not bad. It's probably the best alternative of Facebook. A lot of people make accounts. The problem is that all the people they interact with are on Facebook. They can't get them to move. So they kind of don't keep going on MeWe. They go back to Facebook, no matter how much they detest some of the things that go on there. They're, the problem is
Hmm.
getting the audiences onto the alternative. That's the
Yep.
big challenge.
See, I don't
And
hang out on Facebook that much. So when you say getting the audience, I mean, I get it because there is a huge audience on Facebook, but I'm not one of them. So if
But
somebody's trying to get me to purchase stuff, it's like you're not going to find me on Facebook.
the thing
yeah,
is, the app developer almost has to incentivize both the creator and the audience to
yeah.
get them to go move. If
And I
they
have a
did that, they might be able to get it to happen, maybe.
yeah, and I believe in this friendly competition. But I have one example that I will give that I've followed lately, and it will come more in the future. But it's called first it was called Podfans, but now it developed to you could have also video. They will have ebooks, audiobooks, films, courses, and other things. And you set the listeners or the readers or the consumer set the price. You pay what you want, or the producers say that if you don't pay a certain amount, you can't watch it, read it, or listen to it. But it's called true fans now. So it, you
Hmm.
know, the certain amount of fans, like 100 or 1,000, that want to support you. You have true fans, and that's Sam Setti that have also a podcast with James Cridland called Podcast News. So they talk about podcast news, and there you have gamification. You have all kinds of interesting things, and you could have. I'm trying now to get our guest on podcast and also fellow podcasters and co-hosts to on board, but it will take some time to do it. But
Right.
Right, there's one way to
Right.
do it.
yeah,
There's one way that'll work.
yeah,
You have to get some big name person
yeah,
to go there and engage actively with the true fans that they have, right? And that would cause people, like, it would cause that person's audience to go there,
yeah,
and then if you could get that to snowball, that will work.
yeah, and that will happen. But for now, for example, Spotify. Now they haven't done that anymore. But you know, they paid Joe Rogan like was it $200 million to be exclusive on their platform. So strictly speaking, I wouldn't say that that's a podcast anymore. It's only exclusive on Spotify because you couldn't listen to it on some other service. But now it's open, so it's now you could listen whenever. So it will take time, and for these new podcast apps that I'm talking about, they are still small, but they will over time get more and more popular, and then old media, mainstream media will write about it, and people will and get eyes for it. So and right now it's this nerdy techie in certain sectors like decentralized finance or Bitcoin podcast and freedom of expression, some political tech podcasts and so on. They are into it. But now with this application for podcast music, you will see a new
Hmm.
influx of listeners and podcasters and so on. So it will
Whoa.
come, but it will take some time.
She's
Yeah,
saying
and
time, time,
Yep.
time to go feed.
yeah, and for dogs and cats also. You never know.
That's right. And thank you for tuning in. And please join us at socialcafe.net, and you'll find the calendar there with all the upcoming events. And do you want to say where that is, Gail?
At socialcafe.net/calendar.
Yes. And please join us same time, same place next week, right here in Social Cafe. And thank you, Martin. Thank you, Gail. And thanks for all of you who tuned in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.